Is that really your car? Those plates came back flagged as stolen.
Yes, officer, it's my car. I've had it for years. I can show you my registration. It's in the glove box.
Don't move. Aren't you tired of this? You people always have a story ready.
Officer Harper shouted, as if Samantha were reaching for a weapon instead of paperwork.
Officer, I'm a nurse. I just got off a double shift. I'm not trying to cause any trouble. Just let me get my registration.
Save it. The judge can sort out your sob story.
I'm literally giving you my name. You can verify it in your system right now.
I don't care whose name is on anything. Get on your knees, hands behind your back.
What Officer Harper didn't know was that Samantha was the wife of a 4-star general, and 30 Navy SEALs were already arriving behind him. Samantha Ashton pulled into the gas station on the edge of town, tired down to her bones. 16 hours on her feet in the ER. 16 hours of holding other people's crises in her 2 steady hands. Her scrubs still smelled like the hospital. All she wanted was gas in her tank and a bed under her body. She stepped out, swiped her card, and started fueling. The evening sun hung low and orange over the parking lot. A few other cars sat at the pumps. Somewhere a bell rang as someone walked into the store. Normal. Quiet. The kind of moment nobody remembers until everything changes. Headlights swung in behind her. She didn't think much of it at first. Just another car pulling up to the pumps. But then she heard the door. Heavy. Deliberate. Boots on concrete. "Ma'am, step away from the vehicle." Samantha turned. A police officer stood a few feet back, hand resting near his belt, like she was already a threat. His name tag read, Harper. His eyes moved over her car, her plates, her face, and something in his jaw tightened, like he'd already made up his mind about her. "Is there a problem, officer?" she asked. Calm, steady. The same voice she used on frightened patients in the ER, the one that said everything is under control even when it wasn't. Those plates came back flagged, stolen. Harper's voice was flat, hard, already accusing. "This your car?" "It's my car. I've had it 3 years." She kept her hands visible, slow and careful, the way she'd learned a long time ago that black women had to move in front of police. "I can show you my registration. It's in the glove box." "Don't move." He barked it like she'd already reached for a weapon instead of paperwork. "You people always got a story ready." The words landed like a slap. You people. Samantha felt her stomach tighten, but she didn't let it show on her face. She'd trained herself for years not to give men like this the reaction they wanted. "Officer, I'm a nurse. I just got off a double shift. I am not trying to cause any trouble. Just let me get my registration." "I said don't move." Harper's hand dropped to his belt, resting on his cuffs now. His voice climbed, sharp and public, loud enough that the man pumping gas 2 spots down turned to look. "You're not going to tell me how to do my job." "I'm not telling you anything. I'm asking you to check your system." Samantha's voice stayed level, but underneath it, something cold and furious was building. She had done nothing wrong. She had done nothing. And still his hand was creeping toward his cuffs, like she was a criminal caught mid-crime. "My husband's name is on that registration. Michael Ashton. You can run it right now. I don't care whose name is on anything." Harper stepped closer, boxing her against her own car door. "Get on your knees. Hands behind your back." For 1 second, Samantha didn't move. Not out of defiance, out of disbelief. She had done everything right. She had stayed calm. She had answered every question. She had offered proof. None of it mattered. His mind had been made up the second he ran her plates and decided a black woman in scrubs, alone at a gas station, must be lying. "Officer, I have done nothing." "On your knees. Now." The man at the other pump had his phone out now, filming. A woman near the store doorway stood frozen, watching. Samantha's heart pounded, but her face stayed still, carved from years of holding steady while the world fell apart around her. She lowered herself to the pavement, slow, deliberate, refusing to let fear rush her movements. Hands behind your back. She complied. And still, it wasn't enough. Harper grabbed her wrists and forced them together roughly, the cold metal of the cuffs biting down harder than the moment required. Pain flared up her arms. She gritted her teeth and said nothing, refusing to give him the satisfaction of a cry. "My name is Samantha Ashton," she said again, steady even on her knees. "You can check that name in your system right now." Harper didn't answer. He just tightened his grip on her arm and yanked her forward, off balance, forcing her further down onto the pavement. "Save it," he sneered, leaning close. "Judge can sort out your sob story." The cuffs clicked shut, and Samantha Ashton knelt on the concrete, humiliated in front of strangers, for a crime that existed only in Adam Harper's mind. The concrete was cold under Samantha's knees. Cars kept passing on the road behind her, and every set of headlights felt like another stranger watching her humiliation. She kept her spine straight anyway. She would not let this man see her break. "You're hurting me," she said, quiet but firm. "The cuffs are too tight." Harper crouched beside her, close enough that she could smell his coffee breath. "Good," he said. "Maybe next time you'll cooperate instead of running your mouth." "I never ran my mouth. I answered every question you asked me. See, that's the problem with people like you." He straightened up, looking down at her now, enjoying the height difference. "Always got an excuse. Always think the rules don't apply to you." Samantha said nothing. She had learned, in 16 years of nursing, that some men needed silence more than words. Silence didn't give them anything to grab onto. She stared past him instead, at the pump, at the number ticking on the screen where her gas had stopped filling. He keyed his radio, voice sharp and clipped. "Dispatch, I've got a female suspect. Uncooperative. Possible stolen plates. Requesting backup. Uncooperative." The word burned. She hadn't raised her voice once. She hadn't moved a muscle he hadn't ordered. But the story was already being written, and she wasn't the one holding the pen. A small crowd had gathered without her noticing. A woman near the store entrance held her phone up, filming with shaking hands. A teenage boy on a bike had stopped at the edge of the lot, one foot on the curb, watching with wide eyes. Nobody moved to help. Nobody said a word. They just watched, the way people watch a car crash, afraid that stepping closer might pull them into the wreckage. "Please," Samantha said, looking up at Harper. "Just run my name. Samantha Ashton. That's all I'm asking. I'll run it when I'm good and ready." He grabbed her arm again, yanking her forward so she nearly toppled onto the pavement. Pain shot through her shoulder. "Maybe sit up straight while you wait. Show some respect." Respect. From a man who had cuffed her for existing. She thought of Michael, thousands of miles away on some base she couldn't picture, unaware that his wife was kneeling on pavement outside a gas station because a stranger had decided her skin made her a suspect. She thought of the ER, of the patients she'd comforted just hours ago, of how she always told them the same thing. "You're safe now. I've got you." Nobody was saying that to her. "You people always think somebody's gonna come save you," Harper said, almost laughing now, pacing in front of her. "Well, ain't nobody comin'. Just you, me, and whatever story you're gonna try to tell the judge." Something in Samantha's chest went cold, and still. Not fear, something closer to resolve. She lifted her chin. "You have no idea who's coming," she said quietly. Harper barked out a laugh, sharp and mocking. "Oh, here we go. What? Your husband gonna show up? Some tough guy gonna scare me off? You'll see." "Yeah, I bet I will." He crouched again, getting in her face, voice dropping low and cruel. "Let me tell you something. Out here, I don't care who your husband is. I don't care what you think you are. Out here, you're just another—" The words died in his throat. A low rumble had started somewhere behind him, faint at first, then growing. Engines. Not one. Many. The kind of deep rolling sound that didn't belong to ordinary traffic. Harper straightened up, glancing over his shoulder toward the road, his confidence flickering for the first time. Samantha felt it too. A shift in the air. A weight approaching. She didn't turn her head. She didn't need to. Something in her chest, some old instinct sharpened by years of steadying other people through chaos, told her the ground beneath this moment was about to move. The sound grew louder. Headlights swept across the gas station in a long, unbroken line, vehicle after vehicle turning in off the road. Harper's hand drifted toward his weapon, uncertain now, his bravado cracking at the edges. The teenage boy on the bike backed away. The woman with the phone lowered it slightly, mouth open. Samantha finally turned her head, just enough to see the black SUVs rolling into the lot, one after another, engines idling low and heavy like a held breath. She almost smiled. The SUVs rolled to a stop in a tight, practiced line, filling the gas station lot like a wall closing in. Doors opened all at once, 30 of them in sync, and men in tactical gear stepped out onto the pavement. No shouting, no wasted movement. Just the quiet, controlled precision of people who had done this 100 times before, in places far more dangerous than a gas station. Harper's hand hovered near his holster, his eyes darting from one figure to the next, trying to count them and failing. His backup officers, 2 patrol cars pulling in behind the convoy, sat frozen at their wheels, unsure whether to approach or wait. A man stepped forward from the group, taller than the rest, moving with the calm of someone used to being obeyed without needing to raise his voice. Master Chief Elijah Richards. "Take the cuffs off her," Richards said. Flat. Final. Not a request. Harper found his voice, though it came out thinner than before. "This is police business. You need to step back." "This woman," Richards said, nodding toward Samantha without looking away from Harper, "is Samantha Ashton, wife of General Michael Ashton, 4 stars. And right now, General Ashton is watching this exact moment on a live feed from 10 time zones away." The words hit the lot like a dropped weight. One of the backup officers finally climbed out of his patrol car, hand still on the door, unwilling to come any closer. "That's not—" Harper started, then stopped. His eyes flicked to Samantha, kneeling on the pavement, cuffed and silent, watching him with an expression that had shifted from pain to something sharper. Something that looked a lot like patience, finally paying off. "You can check her ID," Richards said, "or you can keep talking. Either way, this ends the same. Take the cuffs off." Harper's jaw worked, chewing on words he didn't have anymore. He looked at the 30 men standing behind Richards, spread in a loose perimeter around the gas station, calm and unmoving, like a wall that didn't need to threaten anyone to be terrifying. He looked at the phones still raised around the lot, more of them now, capturing every second. "I was following procedure," Harper muttered, more to himself than anyone else. "Take the cuffs off," Richards said again, quieter this time. Quieter was worse. Slowly, Harper crouched behind Samantha. His hands, so steady and rough minutes ago, fumbled now with the key. The cuffs clicked open, and Samantha pulled her wrists free, rubbing the raw skin where the metal had bitten in. "Get up," Harper muttered, not meeting her eyes. Samantha rose on her own, without his help, straightening her spine the way she had refused to let herself do while kneeling. She looked at him, really looked at him, and for the first time since he'd pulled up behind her, he looked away first. "You want to run my name now?" she asked, voice steady, carrying easily across the silent lot. "Samantha Ashton. Go ahead." Harper said nothing. He didn't need to. Everyone standing there already knew the answer. Richards stepped closer to Samantha, lowering his voice just for her. "You all right?" "I'm fine." She rubbed her wrist again, watching Harper retreat toward his patrol car like a man trying to disappear in plain sight. "Better than I was 5 minutes ago." "The General's been watching since the moment your panic alert triggered," Richards said. "We were already routed this way for a separate briefing, close enough to reach you in minutes." Samantha nodded slowly, taking in the scene around her. The soldiers holding their quiet perimeter. The police officers who didn't dare approach. The small crowd still filming. Mouths open, capturing a moment none of them would forget. She thought of the crowd earlier, standing frozen, afraid to help. Now the whole world would see what almost happened to her. Harper climbed into his patrol car without another word, radio crackling with the dispatcher's confused questions he didn't answer. The other officers exchanged glances, unsure what report to file, unsure what had just happened to the traffic stop they'd been called to assist. Samantha watched him go, jaw tight, the adrenaline finally starting to ebb and leave something colder behind it. This wasn't over. She could feel it in her chest, the way she used to feel a patient crashing before the monitors even caught it. Harper hadn't apologized. He hadn't even looked ashamed. Just furious, cornered. And cornered men, she knew, didn't stay quiet for long. The station house was quiet by the time Officer Adam Harper sat down at his desk that night. Quiet, but not calm. His hands still trembled a little from the adrenaline, though he'd never admit that to anyone. He kept replaying the moment in his head. The soldiers, the cameras, the woman on her knees looking up at him like she already knew she'd won. He wasn't going to let her win. He pulled up a blank incident report on his computer and started typing, fingers hitting the keys hard enough to click loud in the empty room. Suspect became combative during a routine stop. Suspect resisted verbal commands. Armed individuals arrived on scene and made unlawful threats against a sworn officer performing his duties. He read it over once, then again, adjusting a word here, softening a phrase there, until the story sounded almost believable. Almost like the truth. He hit submit before he could talk himself out of it. Down the hall, Chief Roger Vilmar sat in his office, the local news already playing quietly on the small TV in the corner. He'd seen the clip twice now, some grainy phone video showing a woman on her knees, cuffed, while dozens of armed men in tactical gear filled the parking lot behind her. It was already climbing online, shared and reshared, comments piling up faster than his officers could screenshot them. Vilmar rubbed his temples. This was the kind of story that ended careers. His career. When Harper's report landed in his inbox 20 minutes later, Vilmar read it slowly, weighing every word. He knew, somewhere in the back of his mind, that it didn't match the video. He knew a false report was a serious thing. But he also knew what admitting the truth would cost the department. Lawsuits, resignations, maybe his own badge. He made his choice. "Pull Harper's body cam footage," he told his assistant chief the next morning, voice flat. "And don't release anything to the press until we've reviewed it." "Sir, the video's already everywhere. People are asking questions. Then we get ahead of it." Vilmar stood, straightening his jacket. "We open an internal review. Focus on the response, the armed detail, whether they had legal grounds to be there, whether Mrs. Ashton's own conduct escalated the situation." The assistant chief hesitated. "What about Officer Harper's conduct?" "That's part of the review, too," Vilmar said, though his tone made clear which part would get the real attention. "But I'm not going to let a viral video turn this department into a punching bag before we know all the facts." It wasn't about facts. Vilmar knew that, even as he said it. It was about control, controlling the story before the story controlled him. He signed off on the paperwork that afternoon, opening a formal investigation. But when he reached the section requiring Harper's body cam footage to be attached, he left it blank, told himself he'd get to it later, told himself it didn't matter yet. It mattered. He just didn't want to look at it. Across town, Samantha sat at her kitchen table, phone in hand, watching the same news clip loop over and over, the comments underneath shifting between outrage and disbelief. Her wrists still ached faintly where the cuffs had bitten in. She hadn't slept. Her phone buzzed. Richards. "They're saying I assaulted him," she said, before he could speak. "I saw it on a friend's screenshot, filed like an hour after we left the station." There was a pause on the line, brief but heavy. "I heard." Vilmar opened an internal review. Convenient timing. Reviewing what? There were 30 witnesses. There's video. "Reviewing whatever gets him out of trouble," Richards said. "I'll be honest with you, Samantha. This isn't going to end with an apology. Men like that don't back down quiet. They dig in." Samantha closed her eyes, exhaustion pressing down harder than it had in years. "So what happens now?" "Now the general knows everything," Richards said. "And you should know. He doesn't let things like this go. Not ever." She looked down at her wrists again, the faint red marks still visible in the kitchen light. "Good," she said quietly. "Neither do I." By morning, the story had changed shape. Samantha stood in her kitchen with a cup of coffee going cold in her hand, scrolling through headline after headline on her phone. The first articles had called it what it was: a woman racially profiled at a gas station, rescued by her husband's military detail. By sunrise, the story had twisted into something else entirely. Armed military unit storms local gas station in unauthorized domestic incident. Questions raised over general's use of federal personnel on U.S. soil. Samantha set the coffee down, her stomach turning. The articles barely mentioned Harper's name. They barely mentioned the cuffs or the ground, or the words you people spoken like a verdict. Instead, they focused on the SUVs, the soldiers. 30 armed men appearing out of nowhere, framed like a threat to the public instead of a rescue. She scrolled further and found a quote from Chief Vilmar's office, careful and vague, refusing to confirm or deny whether the responding officer's conduct was under review, but promising a full investigation into the circumstances surrounding the arrival of an unauthorized paramilitary presence. Unauthorized, paramilitary. Like Richards and his men had shown up to start a war instead of stop one. A knock sounded at her door. She opened it to find Richards standing on her porch, dressed down now. No gear, no formation behind him. Just a tired man in plain clothes, carrying the same weight she felt in her own chest. "You've seen it," he said. Not a question. "I've seen it." She stepped back, letting him in. "They're turning this around on you. On Michael. Like you all did something wrong by showing up." Richards sat at her kitchen table, rubbing a hand over his jaw. "It's not an accident. Somebody in that department is feeding this narrative to reporters, trying to make the story about us instead of about Harper." "Can they even do that? You're not active duty right now, are you?" "No. That's the thing." Richards shook his head. "We responded as private citizens, veterans. Nothing about it was official military action, which means legally we're clean. But it doesn't stop them from making it look bad in the papers. Public opinion doesn't care about legal technicalities." Samantha sat across from him, exhaustion pulling at her shoulders. "So, what do we do? Just let them write whatever story they want?" "No." Richards's voice hardened. "But you should know something first. Michael is watching every headline, every quote, every word Vilmar's office puts out." He paused. "He's not going to forgive this quietly. I need you to understand that. What happened at that gas station lit something in him he doesn't put out easily. Good, Samantha said, because I don't plan on letting it go either. Richard studied her for a long moment. The problem is, right now, silence is working against you. They've got the microphone. Vilmar is choosing what story gets told, and you're not in the room. Samantha's jaw tightened. She thought of every patient she'd ever comforted in the ER, every moment she'd had to take control of a chaotic room with nothing but her voice and her composure. She wasn't helpless. She'd never been helpless. She just hadn't been given a microphone yet. Then get me one, she said. Richards raised an eyebrow. What are you thinking? A news interview. Local station. I tell my side in my words before they finish writing theirs. She stood, some of the exhaustion burning away, replaced by something sharper. I'm not going to sit here and let them turn me into the villain of my own arrest. Richards nodded slowly, a flicker of something like respect crossing his face. I can make a call. Get you in front of a camera by tomorrow. Do it. Samantha looked down at her wrists, the faint marks from the cuffs almost gone now, though the memory of them wasn't going anywhere. They already tried to write my story once. I'm not giving them the pen twice. The studio lights felt hotter than Samantha expected. She sat in a stiff chair across from a local news anchor, a small microphone clipped to her collar, her hands folded steady in her lap. Somewhere behind the cameras, a producer counted down on his fingers. 3, 2, 1. Tonight we're joined by Samantha Ashton, the anchor said, turning to face her, the woman at the center of a story that's captured national attention. Samantha, thank you for being here. Thank you for having me. Let's start from the beginning. Walk us through what happened. Samantha took a breath, steady and even, the same breath she used before telling a family their loved one wasn't going to make it. Some truths needed a calm voice to land right. I was getting gas after a 16-hour shift at the hospital where I work as a trauma nurse, she said. Officer Harper approached my car and accused me of driving with stolen plates. I offered my registration. I told him my name. I never raised my voice, never made a threatening move. He ordered me to the ground and cuffed me anyway. There's been a report filed claiming you were combative during the arrest, the anchor said. How do you respond to that? I'd invite anyone to watch the footage a bystander recorded that night, Samantha said, voice calm but firm. It shows me on my knees, cooperating fully, repeating my name and asking him to check his system. It does not show resistance. It shows a man who decided I was guilty before he had a single fact. The anchor nodded, pulling up a small clip on the studio monitor. Grainy phone footage of Samantha kneeling, cuffed, Harper standing over her. The room went quiet as it played. Even the crew, who'd seen it a dozen times editing the segment, watched with tight jaws. There have also been reports calling the response from your husband's military detail an unauthorized paramilitary incursion, the anchor continued. What's your response to that framing? Samantha's eyes hardened, just slightly. 30 men in tactical gear responded to a woman being wrongfully detained. Not one weapon was drawn. Not one threat was made beyond a request that a police officer verify my identity before continuing to violate my rights. If that's paramilitary, I'd like someone to explain what they'd call the man who put me on the ground for no reason. The anchor let the silence sit for a beat before moving on. Officer Harper remains on duty as of this interview. Does that concern you? It concerns me deeply, Samantha said, because it tells every person watching this that his badge matters more than my rights, that a false report carries more weight than video evidence. I'm not asking for revenge. I'm asking for accountability. That's all this has ever been about. The interview wrapped minutes later, but the words kept circling long after the cameras stopped rolling. Clips of Samantha's calm, precise answers spread online faster than the department's vague statements ever had. By morning, public sentiment had shifted hard in her favor. Comment sections flooding with outrage over Harper's conduct instead of suspicion over the soldiers who'd stopped it. Chief Vilmar watched the segment alone in his office, jaw tight, phone buzzing nonstop with messages from the mayor's office. He couldn't ignore this the way he'd ignored the video. Not with her voice attached to it now, steady and undeniable. By noon, he'd signed the order, placing Harper on desk duty, effective immediately. A public gesture. A pressure valve released just enough to quiet the loudest voices. But in the paperwork, buried where reporters wouldn't think to look, Vilmar made sure the reassignment was labeled temporary, pending review. Harper's personnel file remained untouched. No formal discipline, no suspension without pay. Just enough to look like accountability, without actually costing the department anything. Across town, Councilman Jeremy Granger watched the same segment from his office, a different kind of calculation running behind his eyes. He saw opportunity where others saw outrage, a chance to defend the department publicly, protect its funding, and paint the general's household as reckless with military resources. He picked up his phone and began drafting a statement of his own. Samantha, unaware of the quiet moves being made against her, felt something close to relief for the first time since kneeling on that pavement. She'd taken back her own story. She had no idea the fight over it had only just begun. A week passed before Samantha realized how deliberately the silence had been built around her. She'd filed the formal request the day after her interview aired. Official body cam footage from the night of her arrest, requested through the department's records office, the same routine process anyone could file. She expected delay. She hadn't expected what came back. The footage is corrupted, the clerk told her over the phone, voice flat and rehearsed, like she'd said the same line to someone else already that morning. We're unable to recover a usable file at this time. Corrupted how? Samantha asked, gripping the phone tighter. It's police equipment. It's maintained specifically so this doesn't happen. I don't have further information, ma'am. You can submit a formal complaint if you'd like. Samantha hung up and sat with the dial tone ringing in her ears longer than it should have. Corrupted. Convenient. She didn't believe it for a second. But disbelief didn't get her the footage. She brought the issue to District Attorney Marie Lennon's office that afternoon, sitting across a wide desk from a woman who greeted her with careful, practiced sympathy. I understand your frustration, Mrs. Ashton, Lennon said, folding her hands. But without the body cam footage, and with the department's internal review still ongoing, my office needs to be cautious about how we proceed. I can't subpoena evidence based on suspicion alone. You have a bystander's video. You have my statement. You have 30 witnesses who watched him cuff me for no reason. I have a viral clip and a lot of public pressure, Lennon said, not unkindly, but not moving either. That's not the same as a case I can guarantee holds up in court. I'd rather build this properly than rush it and lose. Samantha left the office with her jaw tight, recognizing the shape of what was happening even if no one would say it plainly. Nobody wanted to be the one who moved first. Everybody was waiting to see which way the political wind blew before committing to anything. That evening, she called Richards, exhaustion bleeding into her voice for the first time since the interview. They're stalling, she said. Vilmar says the footage is corrupted. Lennon says she needs more before she'll act. Everyone's got a reason to wait. Then we stop waiting on them, Richards said. I've been talking to a few of the guys. We're going back to the gas station tomorrow. Not in uniform, just as citizens asking questions. Asking who? Whoever was there that night. Staff, regulars, people who might have seen something before we ever showed up. The next day, Richards and two of his men walked the gas station parking lot in plain clothes, speaking quietly with the clerk who'd watched the whole thing from behind the counter, too afraid to step outside. She remembered more than she'd told anyone. Remembered Harper pulling over other cars in that same lot before. Always drivers who looked like Samantha. They found a mechanic 2 blocks away who'd been profiled by Harper during a traffic stop the previous year, cuffed on the hood of his own truck for a taillight violation that turned into an hour of questioning about a car he legally owned. They found a teenage boy's mother, furious and eager to talk, describing how Harper had once held her son at gunpoint outside this same station over a mistaken identity that took 40 minutes to sort out. One by one, the stories stacked up. Not proof of what happened to Samantha specifically, but proof of a pattern. A man who saw certain faces and made his mind up before he ever ran a plate. Richards wrote each statement down carefully, dates and names, filing them away in a folder he kept locked in his car. "This isn't nothing," he told Samantha that night, laying the growing file on her kitchen table. "This is a pattern. Departments protect patterns until the pattern gets too big to hide." Samantha flipped through the statements slowly, feeling something shift in her chest. Not relief exactly, but momentum. Proof that she wasn't the only one. Proof this had happened before, and would happen again, unless someone forced it into daylight. "Nobody's used any of this yet," she said quietly. "No," Richards agreed, "but it's ready when we need it." Sometimes the truth just needs somewhere to land. Samantha closed the folder, resolve hardening behind her tired eyes. Then, let's make sure it has somewhere to land. The patrol car passed Samantha's house for the 3rd time that week on a Tuesday evening, slow enough that she noticed it from the kitchen window while washing dishes. She set the plate down carefully, watching through the curtain as the car rolled by at a crawl, brake lights flashing once at the end of the block before turning around and coming back the other direction. Same car, same officer behind the wheel. Harper. He didn't stop. He didn't have to. The message was clear enough just from the slow, deliberate pace, the way his head turned toward her house as he passed. "I know where you live. I can come back whenever I want." She called Richards that night, her voice tighter than she wanted it to be. "He's driven past 3 times this week," she said. "Always around the same time, always slow. He's not even pretending it's a coincidence anymore." "Did he stop? Say anything?" "No, just drives by. Looks at the house." She pressed a hand against her forehead. "It's worse somehow. If he came up and said something, at least I could point to it. This is just him letting me know he can." Richard's voice hardened on the other end. "I'll document it. Time, date, plate number, everything. It won't be enough to charge him with anything on its own, but it adds to the pattern. Shows he doesn't stop just because he's under review. He's supposed to be on desk duty." "Desk duty doesn't mean house arrest," Richards said. "He can still drive his own car on his own time. Legally, there's nothing stopping him from driving down a public street. Legally." Samantha repeated the word like it tasted bad in her mouth. "He gets to hide behind legal every single time." "Not forever," Richards said. "But right now, yeah. He knows exactly how far he can push before it becomes something we can act on. Men like that always do." After she hung up, Samantha sat alone at her kitchen table for a long time, the folder of witness statements Richards had given her sitting untouched in front of her. She thought about the mechanic cuffed on his own truck, the teenage boy held at gunpoint over mistaken identity. How many others had sat exactly where she was sitting now, watching a patrol car roll past their house at night, wondering how far one man's cruelty was allowed to reach before someone stopped him. She picked up her phone and called Michael. It was early morning where he was, the line crackling faintly with distance. His voice came through steady despite the hour, the same voice that had steadied her through a dozen hard nights over the years. "He's driving past the house," she told him. "Slow, on purpose, just to remind me he can." There was a long pause on the line, heavy enough that she could feel his anger traveling across thousands of miles. "I've requested emergency leave," Michael said finally. "It's being processed now. I should be able to come home within the week." "Michael, you don't have to—" "Samantha." His voice cut gently through her protest. "I'm not asking permission. I'm telling you what's already happening. I'm not staying on the other side of the world while a man intimidates my wife in her own driveway." She closed her eyes, some of the tension in her shoulders easing just slightly at the certainty in his voice. "Okay, I'll call you the second the leave clears," he said. "Stay careful. Keep documenting everything. And Samantha, this isn't going to end with him driving past your house forever. I promise you that." The next morning, Councilman Jeremy Granger held a brief press conference outside City Hall, flanked by 2 aides, his expression carefully arranged into concern. "While we take the events at the gas station seriously," he said into the bank of microphones, "we also have serious questions about the chain of custody surrounding evidence collected that night, given the unusual and frankly alarming presence of an armed private security detail at the scene. Until those questions are resolved, I've encouraged District Attorney Lennon's office to proceed with caution." By that afternoon, Lennon's office released a brief statement of its own, careful and clipped. Charges against Officer Harper would not be pursued at this time, pending further review. Samantha read the statement twice on her phone, sitting at the same kitchen table where the witness folder still lay open. Somewhere out there, Harper was probably reading the same words, feeling safe again. She folded her arms on the table and stared at nothing for a long moment. Anger and exhaustion tangled together in her chest. Pending review. She was starting to understand that phrase was just another word for waiting for you to give up. She wasn't going to give up. Samantha couldn't sleep that night. She lay awake staring at the ceiling, running the gas station scene over and over in her mind, searching for something she'd missed. Somewhere in the replay, a detail snagged. Stolen plates. Card fraud. That's what Harper had accused her of first, before any of it turned into cuffs and concrete. He'd claimed her plates came back flagged, tied the accusation to her card at the pump like she'd used stolen information to buy gas. It hadn't mattered in the moment. Nothing he said had mattered next to the cuffs closing around her wrists. But now, lying awake at 2 a.m, the detail wouldn't let her go. She sat up, reaching for her phone, mind moving the way it did in the ER when a patient's numbers didn't add up, and she had to work backward to find the cause. Card fraud, pump reader. She'd spent enough years working night shifts, chatting with security guards and gas station clerks between calls, to remember something most people never thought about. Card readers at pumps synced to cloud servers, not for convenience, for fraud prevention. Every station connected to a corporate chain kept camera footage tied to transaction data, stored off-site, specifically so a compromised card couldn't be denied or covered up locally. If Harper had accused her of exactly that kind of fraud, the station's own corporate system might have footage nobody at the police department controlled. She was out of bed before she'd fully finished the thought. Laptop open on the kitchen table by 2:30, searching for the corporate contact information printed faintly on her old receipt from that night. The next morning, she called their fraud protection line directly, bypassing the police department entirely. She explained she'd been accused, publicly and falsely, of card and plate fraud at one of their locations, and requested any footage or transaction data tied to the incident under standard consumer protection procedures. The representative on the line, unaware of the news story attached to the request, processed it like any other case. 3 days later, an email arrived with a secured download link. Samantha's hands trembled slightly as she opened the file at her kitchen table, Richards sitting beside her, both of them leaning toward the screen. The footage was clear, untouched. Nothing like the corrupted file Harper's department had claimed didn't exist. It showed everything. Samantha pumping gas, Harper approaching, the cuffs, the soldiers arriving. All of it captured from an angle the bystander's phone hadn't caught. Closer, sharper, undeniable. But it was the audio that made Richards go still beside her. Near the end of the clip, after the cuffs had come off and Harper had retreated toward his patrol car, a second officer approached him. Low voice barely caught by the pump's microphone. "You sure about this?" "She's not resisting." Harper's voice came through clear, careless, thinking no one who mattered was listening. "Doesn't matter. I know what I saw. Profiled her the second she pulled in. Wasn't wrong either. Profiled her." His own words. Not an accident. Not a misunderstanding. A confession, spoken carelessly into a camera he didn't know was recording. Samantha sat back slowly, feeling something settle in her chest that hadn't settled in weeks. This wasn't her word against his anymore. This was proof. Documented, time-stamped, undeniable proof of intent. "He just handed us the whole case," Richards said quietly, replaying the clip a second time. "He didn't think anyone would ever hear it," Samantha said. "That's the difference. He wasn't performing for cameras. He was just telling the truth to a co-worker." Richards closed the laptop carefully. Like the file itself was something fragile that needed protecting now that they finally had it. "We need to get this to Lennon immediately. Certified copy. Chain of custody documented from the start, so nobody can claim it was altered." "They'll try to say it's inadmissible somehow," Samantha said. "They've stalled on everything else." "Maybe. But it's a lot harder to bury a confession than a bystander's shaky phone video." Richard stood, already reaching for his jacket. "This changes things, Samantha. This isn't a pattern anymore. This is him, on tape, admitting he broke the law on purpose." Samantha looked at the frozen frame on the laptop screen. Harper's face, caught mid-sentence, careless, and certain no one was listening. She thought of every excuse Vilmar's office had offered, every delay Lennon had hidden behind, every slow drive past her house meant to remind her she was powerless. She wasn't powerless. Not anymore. "Send it," she said. "Today." Chief Vilmar heard about the footage before he saw it. An aide knocked on his office door that afternoon, pale and hesitant, saying Lennon's office had received a certified copy of gas station cloud footage from the night of the Ashton arrest, submitted directly by Samantha through the corporate fraud line, completely outside the department's control. Vilmar felt his stomach drop. "Get me the file," he said. "Now." It took his IT officer 20 minutes to pull up the department's own copy, the one buried in the evidence server under Harper's original incident report, the one Vilmar had told himself he'd get to later. He watched it alone in his office, door locked, volume low. The audio hit him worse than he expected. Profiled her the second she pulled in. Wasn't wrong either. Harper's careless voice confessing everything the department had spent weeks denying. Vilmar sat back in his chair, jaw tight, mind moving fast through every possible outcome. If this footage reached Lennon officially, reached the press, reached anyone with the authority to act on it, the department's entire narrative collapsed. Harper wouldn't be the only one who paid for it. Vilmar's name was on every delay, every stalled review, every quiet decision to protect a bad officer over the truth. He made a choice he would later regret more than any other in his career. He logged into the evidence server and flagged the department's copy of the footage as under review, chain of custody concerns, a technical label that would freeze it from being formally entered into any court filing without additional department sign-off. Not deletion. He wasn't foolish enough to delete it outright. Just enough friction to slow it down, buy time, maybe find a legal angle to keep it out of a courtroom entirely. What Vilmar didn't know was that the department's evidence system synced automatically with the DA's office through a shared digital chain of custody protocol, installed 2 years earlier after a different scandal about missing evidence. Any flag placed on a file connected to an active outside request triggered an automatic notification to Lennon's IT liaison. The notification landed on a young analyst's desk within the hour. She read it twice, confused at first, then increasingly alarmed. A police department flagging evidence after an outside party had already submitted an untouched copy of the same footage wasn't a coincidence. It looked exactly like what it was: an attempt to suppress evidence already circulating outside the department's control. She forwarded it straight to Lennon with a note. "This needs your attention immediately." Lennon stared at the flag for a long time before picking up her phone. Meanwhile, halfway around the world, General Michael Ashton's emergency leave finally cleared. Within 2 days, he was on a flight home. The long hours in the air giving him nothing to do but replay every phone call with Samantha, every headline Richards had sent him, every excuse the department had used to avoid holding one man accountable. He landed and went straight to Samantha's house. No stop at his own quarters, no delay. She opened the door and, for the first time since the gas station, let herself fully exhale, sinking into an embrace that held weeks of exhaustion she hadn't let herself feel until now. "I'm here," Michael said quietly, into her hair. "I'm not leaving again until this is finished." That evening, Richards arrived with the full folder of witness statements, formally filing copies with Lennon's office alongside the cloud footage. Sworn accounts from the mechanic, the teenage boy's mother, the gas station clerk, each one describing a pattern of profiling that stretched back years. Combined with Harper's own recorded confession, and now the department's suspicious attempt to flag the footage, the case had shifted shape entirely. This wasn't one bad night anymore. This was a department protecting a pattern, and a chief willing to tamper with evidence to keep protecting it. 2 days later, Vilmar's assistant chief brought him a message that made his stomach turn cold. "DA's office is requesting a meeting," she said. "Chief Vilmar, personally. They want to talk about Harper's case." Vilmar sat with the message for a long moment, calculating. A meeting could mean pressure. It could also mean opportunity, a chance to control the narrative one more time, to offer something small in exchange for keeping the bigger truth buried. "Set it up," he said finally. "Closed door. Just us." He told himself it was a negotiation. Told himself he could still manage this, still protect the department, still walk away with his job intact, if he played it carefully enough. He had no idea that the meeting he was about to request would become the very thing that ended him. The meeting was set for 10 in the morning, a small conference room inside the district attorney's building. Samantha, Michael, and Richards arrived together, 5 minutes early, folder of evidence in hand, expecting a quiet conversation about Harper's termination and the department's accountability. Instead, they found the room empty. "This is the right room, isn't it?" Samantha asked, checking the door number twice. Michael's jaw tightened. Something felt wrong. He'd led enough negotiations in his career to recognize the shape of a setup before he could name it. "Something's off." A receptionist hurried down the hallway toward them, apologetic and flustered. "I'm so sorry. There's been a change. The meeting's been moved to the main conference hall. Chief Vilmar and Councilman Granger are already there. Reporters, too." Samantha felt her stomach drop. "Reporters?" By the time they reached the main hall, it was too late to do anything but walk into what had already been built without them. Cameras lined the back wall. A podium stood at the front, Vilmar and Granger standing behind it, both looking calm in a way that made Samantha's skin crawl. Granger stepped up to the microphone first, straightening his jacket, voice smooth and rehearsed. "Thank you all for coming on short notice. We wanted to address growing concerns from this community regarding the events at the gas station several weeks ago and clarify the department's findings. Samantha grabbed Michael's arm, feeling the trap close around them in real time. After a thorough review, Vilmar said, stepping to the microphone next, our department has determined that key evidence in this case, specifically footage submitted outside official channels, cannot be verified for chain of custody due to the unusual and unauthorized presence of an armed private detail at the original scene. As such, this evidence does not meet the standard required for prosecution. A murmur rippled through the reporters. Someone shouted a question Samantha couldn't fully hear over the ringing in her ears. Additionally, Vilmar continued, Officer Harper has been reinstated to full duty, effective immediately, having been cleared of any wrongdoing pending this review. Michael's hand tightened around Samantha's, his whole body rigid beside her. Richards stood frozen a step behind them, disbelief flickering across his face before hardening into something colder. They're using the rescue against us, Samantha whispered, barely able to get the words out. The very thing that saved me. They're using it to throw out the evidence. It was clean. It was clever. And it was exactly the kind of technicality that could hold up just long enough to bury the case in appeals and reviews while Harper walked free, badge back on his chest, smiling faintly from somewhere near the back of the room. Granger fielded a few more questions, deflecting anything specific with practiced ease, framing the entire ordeal as a cautionary tale about military overreach rather than the racial profiling that started it. Reporters scribbled notes. Cameras flashed. The story was already writing itself in front of them, and once again, Samantha wasn't the one holding the pen. By the time the press conference ended, the damage was done. Headlines would run by evening. Charges dropped against officer in Ashton case. Evidence deemed inadmissible. Months of effort. The witness statements. The recovered footage. Harper's own careless confession. All of it reduced to a technicality about who had been standing where on a gas station lot weeks ago. Samantha stood in the emptying hall, feeling hollowed out in a way even the cuffs hadn't managed. She'd done everything right. She'd stayed calm, gathered proof, given the system every chance to work the way it was supposed to. And the system had found a loophole anyway, one built from the very rescue that had saved her life. They planned this, Richards said quietly, jaw tight, watching Vilmar shake hands with a reporter near the exit. The closed-door meeting was never real. This was the plan the whole time. Michael said nothing for a long moment, watching the same scene, something cold and controlled settling behind his eyes. The look Samantha recognized from every hard conversation he'd ever had before making a decision that couldn't be undone. He finally turned to her, taking both her hands in his. Vilmar just made a mistake, he said quietly, steady despite everything. He turned this into a chain of command problem. Samantha looked up at him, exhaustion and fury tangled together in her chest. What does that mean? Michael's eyes didn't leave hers. It means he forgot I still have one. They didn't go home that night. Instead, they sat around Samantha's kitchen table. Michael, Samantha, and Richards, the same table where the witness folder had first landed weeks ago, now buried under printouts, timelines, and a laptop still open to the cloud footage. Say it plainly, Samantha said, watching Michael's face. What do you mean? You still have a chain of command? Michael leaned back in his chair, some of the rigid control from the press conference finally easing into something more focused. Vilmar just used the SEAL detail's presence to throw out evidence. He built his entire defense on painting us as an unauthorized military force, acting outside the law. He shook his head slowly. So we don't give him that fight again. We don't send soldiers back into that gas station lot. We beat him with exactly the kind of process he claims to respect. The legal process, Richards said, catching on. The one he just tried to weaponize against us. Exactly. Michael tapped the folder in front of them. Everything we need is already here. It was here before that press conference ever happened. He didn't defeat us. He just forced us to stop waiting for permission to use it. Richards pulled the folder open, laying it flat across the table. We've got the cloud footage. Untouched, verified, time-stamped, with his own confession recorded on it. We've got the pattern of conduct statements, 4 separate witnesses describing the same behavior going back years. And now, thanks to Vilmar panicking, we've got a documented tampering flag showing he tried to suppress evidence that had already been submitted through outside legal channels. That flag is the real gift, Michael said. He didn't just protect a bad officer. He committed evidence tampering to do it. That's not a review anymore. That's obstruction. Samantha sat forward, some of the hollow exhaustion from the press conference beginning to burn away, replaced by the same sharp clarity she used to feel walking into a trauma bay mid-crisis, when panic had to give way to procedure, or people died. So we take it to Lennon, formally, all of it, together. We already have, Richards said. The footage and statements were filed the day I brought them over. They're sitting in her office right now, whether she wants to act on them or not. Then why hasn't she acted? Samantha asked. Because she's scared, Michael said simply. Granger's been leaning on her. Vilmar has been leaning on her. She's an elected official worried about picking a side before she knows which way the public will land. He tapped the folder again. So we make sure she doesn't have a choice. Richards looked up. How? Granger's scheduling a city council meeting, Michael said. I got word an hour ago. He's using it to publicly grandstand about military overreach, probably trying to build on the momentum from today's press conference. Reporters will be there. Cameras. A packed room. Samantha's eyes narrowed, understanding dawning. You want to walk into his own stage? He built a platform to attack us, Michael said. Fine. We'll use it to present everything in public, in front of the same cameras he invited. Lennon will be there too. Council meetings on police matters always draw the DA's office. If she has to respond to hard evidence live, in front of reporters, she won't have the luxury of quietly stalling anymore. Richards leaned back, a slow, grim smile finally breaking across his face for the first time in weeks. He's handing us the room himself. He is, Michael said. And we're not walking in with soldiers this time. Just proof. Nothing he can spin, nothing he can twist into another headline about overreach. Just the truth, laid out where nobody can look away from it. Samantha closed the folder gently, feeling the weight of it differently now. Not as a burden they'd been carrying for weeks, but as a weapon finally ready to be used. When's the meeting? 3 days, Michael said. Enough time to make sure everything's organized, certified, ready to present without a single gap they can exploit. Samantha nodded slowly, looking between her husband and Richards, the 2 men who had stood beside her since the moment the SUVs rolled into that gas station lot. She thought of the cuffs, the false report, the slow drives past her house. The press conference built entirely to bury her. None of it had broken her. It had only sharpened what she carried into this next fight. Then let's get ready, she said, because this time, we're the ones setting the trap. The council chamber was packed by the time Samantha, Michael, and Richards arrived, folder in hand, 3 days of preparation compressed into a single leather case Michael carried under his arm. Reporters lined the back wall, cameras already rolling, drawn by Granger's promise of a story about military overreach. Granger stood at the podium when the meeting opened, straightening his notes with the calm confidence of a man who believed he still controlled the room. Tonight, he began, addressing the packed chamber and the cameras beyond it, we need to have a serious conversation about the presence of armed private military personnel operating within our city limits, and the precedent it sets when a general's household can deploy federal-adjacent resources against local law enforcement without oversight. Murmurs rippled through the crowd. A few heads turned toward Michael, sitting quietly in the third row beside Samantha, his face unreadable. Granger continued, warming to his own rhythm. "We are a nation of laws, and laws apply equally, regardless of rank or connection. Point of order." Michael stood, his voice carrying easily across the chamber without needing to be raised. "As a citizen and taxpayer of this city, I request the floor to respond directly to the concerns raised." A ripple of surprise moved through the room. Granger's composure flickered, just slightly, before he recovered with a practiced smile. "Of course, General." Briefly. Michael walked to the podium as Granger stepped aside, reluctant but unable to refuse without looking evasive in front of the cameras. He set the folder down and opened it calmly. "3 weeks ago," Michael began, "my wife was profiled, detained, and cuffed on the ground outside a gas station for the crime of driving her own car. I'd like to play something for this room." He connected his phone to the chamber's audio system without waiting for permission. The recording played clearly through the speakers. Harper's careless voice caught on the gas station's own cloud footage, admitting without hesitation, "Profiled her the second she pulled in. Wasn't wrong either." The room went dead silent. "That is Officer Adam Harper," Michael said, confirming on camera, in his own words, that he targeted my wife based on nothing but her appearance. This footage was recovered directly from the gas station's corporate fraud protection system after the department claimed its own copy was corrupted. He pulled a second document from the folder. "This is a formal notification from the district attorney's evidence system, showing that Chief Roger Vilmar flagged this same footage internally, attempting to block its use after an untouched copy had already been submitted through outside legal channels. That is not a review. That is evidence tampering." Gasps moved through the crowd. Reporters leaned forward, pens moving fast. Michael pulled a third stack of papers free. "And these are sworn witness statements from 4 separate individuals, describing a documented pattern of racial profiling by Officer Harper stretching back years, filed formally with the district attorney's office weeks ago." He looked up, finding Lennon seated near the front of the chamber, her face pale under the reporter's cameras now trained directly on her. "District Attorney Lennon has had all of this evidence in her possession," Michael said, voice steady but unmistakably hard, "including proof that the department attempted to suppress it. I'd like to know, on the record, in front of this room, what her office intends to do about it." Every camera swung toward Lennon. Every reporter waited, pens hovering. She sat frozen for a long moment, the weight of the room pressing down on her, the political calculations that had protected her for weeks finally collapsing under the simple, undeniable fact of public witness. Granger, beside the podium, opened his mouth to interject, but no words came. There was nothing left to spin. Lennon rose slowly from her seat, smoothing her jacket, and walked to the podium herself. She looked briefly at Michael, then at Samantha, sitting quiet and composed in the third row, then finally out at the room full of cameras that would carry whatever she said next to every household watching tonight. "In light of the evidence presented," she said, voice steady despite the tremor beneath it, "my office will be filing formal charges against Officer Adam Harper effective immediately, on counts including civil rights violations and falsifying an official report." She paused, drawing a breath before continuing. "Additionally, I am opening a formal investigation into Chief Roger Vilmar for evidence tampering and obstruction of justice." The chamber erupted. Reporters shouted questions. Granger stood frozen at the edge of the podium, his own name suddenly tangled in a scandal he'd built the stage for himself. Samantha sat perfectly still, watching justice move for the first time since the moment she'd knelt on that gas station pavement, feeling something long overdue finally begin to settle into place. The council chamber hadn't even fully emptied before the first officers arrived. Word moved fast through the department once Lennon's announcement hit local news feeds live from the meeting room. Within the hour, 2 patrol cars pulled up outside the building where Harper had gone. Unaware his reinstatement that morning had already expired in every way that mattered. He was found at the station, still in uniform, still wearing the badge Vilmar had handed back to him only hours earlier. The officers who approached him were men he'd worked beside for years, faces he recognized, though none of them met his eyes for long. "Adam Harper," one of them said, voice flat, official. "You're under arrest for civil rights violations and falsifying an official police report." The cuffs clicked shut around his wrists, the same sound, the same motion that he'd used on Samantha weeks earlier, only now turned back on himself. Reporters, tipped off by the chaos still spilling out of the council chamber, arrived just in time to catch him being led out through the station's front doors, his face carved from disbelief. "This is insane," he muttered to no one in particular, loud enough for the cameras to catch. "I was doing my job." Nobody answered him. Nobody needed to. Across town, Chief Vilmar received the news of the investigation into his own conduct while still sitting in the council chamber's back office, the sound of reporters shouting questions bleeding faintly through the walls. He stared at the message on his phone for a long moment. Formal notice of an internal affairs investigation, evidence tampering, obstruction of justice, and felt the last of his options collapse around him. He didn't wait for the department to force his hand. By early evening, before the news cycle had even finished digesting Harper's arrest, Vilmar submitted his resignation, effective immediately. No press conference, no statement defending his choices, just a short letter released through the department's public relations office, citing personal reasons that fooled absolutely no one watching the story unfold. Councilman Granger's collapse came slower, but no less complete. Reporters who had come to his meeting expecting a story about military overreach instead left with a story about a councilman who had used his own platform to shield a chief now under criminal investigation. By the next morning, his office was flooded with calls demanding answers about what he'd known and when he'd known it. His campaign staff, sensing the wreckage forming around him, began quietly distancing themselves. Within days, his re-election bid, once considered a formality, had effectively ended before a single vote was cast. Samantha watched all of it unfold from beside Michael and Richards, standing just outside the council building as the last of the reporters packed up their equipment for the night. It didn't feel like triumph exactly. It felt heavier than that. The slow, grinding weight of finally being believed after weeks of being doubted, delayed, and dismissed. "It's really happening," she said quietly, watching a news van pull away with footage of Harper's arrest already cut for the 11 o'clock broadcast. "It is," Michael said, his hand resting steady on her shoulder. "Because you didn't stop. Not once." Richard stood a step behind them, arms crossed, something like quiet vindication settling into his expression for the first time in weeks. "For what it's worth," he said, "the guys and I never doubted it would end here. Just wasn't sure how long it would take the system to catch up to what we already knew." Samantha managed a tired smile. "Longer than it should have. Always is," Richards said. A reporter, spotting the three of them still standing near the building, jogged over with a microphone extended, cameraman trailing close behind. "Mrs. Ashton, do you have any comment on tonight's developments?" Samantha glanced at Michael, who gave the smallest nod, stepping back slightly to give her the space she'd fought weeks to earn. She turned toward the camera, steady despite the exhaustion still sitting heavy behind her eyes. The reporter held the microphone closer, waiting. Samantha drew a slow breath, feeling the weight of everything, the cuffs, the false report, the slow drives past her house, the press conference built to bury her. settle into something she could finally speak instead of simply survive. The camera light blinked red, waiting. Samantha looked directly into the lens, her voice steady in a way that surprised even her. "For weeks, people have asked why I didn't stay quiet," she said. "Why I kept pushing when it would have been easier to let this go. The truth is simple. I was never the one who needed to be investigated. I was never the one who needed to explain myself. I was a woman getting gas after a long shift, and a man decided my skin made me guilty before I ever said a word." She paused, letting the silence carry as much weight as the sentence before it. Tonight, the system finally looked at the truth instead of looking away from it. That's not a victory. That's what should have happened from the very beginning. The reporter thanked her, and the crew began packing up, the story already being cut for broadcasts running within the hour. Michael stepped back beside her, his hand finding hers, steady and warm after weeks of distance and fear. "You didn't need me to say a single word up there," he said quietly. "No," Samantha agreed, "but I'm glad you were standing behind me anyway." 2 days later, the story reached its final scene in the last place anyone expected, the same gas station where it had all begun. Samantha stood near the pumps that afternoon, not because she had to, but because she needed to. Michael stood beside her, Richards a few steps back, watching quietly as a small crowd gathered near the edge of the lot, drawn by the news vans that had followed the final development of the case here, of all places. A patrol car pulled in slowly, the same kind of vehicle that had once parked behind her with headlights she hadn't thought twice about. This time, it carried 2 officers escorting Adam Harper, his hands cuffed in front of him, his uniform replaced by plain clothes now that his badge had been formally stripped following his arraignment that morning. He was being brought here for a final walkthrough with investigators, retracing the scene as part of the formal case file. An ordinary procedural step that had, by coincidence or design, landed on the exact pavement where everything started. Harper's eyes found Samantha across the lot. For a long moment, neither of them said anything. He looked smaller now, stripped of the authority that had once let him force a stranger to her knees without a second thought. Whatever cruelty had lived behind his eyes that first evening had curdled into something closer to fear. Samantha didn't approach him. She didn't need to say anything else. She'd already said everything that mattered in front of the cameras 2 nights ago, and in every quiet, determined choice she'd made in the weeks between then and now. She simply watched as the officers guided Harper toward the same stretch of pavement where he'd once cuffed her, and then past it, toward the waiting patrol car. "You okay?" Michael asked quietly, his hand steady against her back. "Yeah," Samantha said, and found she meant it. "I think I finally am." Richard stepped up beside them, watching the scene with the same quiet satisfaction he'd carried since the council meeting. "Funny thing about pattern of conduct cases," he said. "They don't just end with one man. 2 more officers came forward yesterday, corroborating complaints going back years. Internal Affairs is opening a wider review of the department." Samantha nodded slowly, feeling something settle deep in her chest. Not just relief for herself, but for the mechanic cuffed on his own truck, the teenage boy held at gunpoint over mistaken identity, every name buried in that folder Richards had carried from door to door weeks ago. Their stories mattered now, too. Documented, believed. The officers guided Harper into the back of the patrol car, closing the door with a heavy, final click. The engine started, and the car began pulling away from the pumps, past the spot where Samantha had once knelt on cold concrete, past the space where 30 soldiers had once stood in a wall of quiet resolve. Samantha watched until the car disappeared around the corner, the gas station falling quiet again behind it. The same ordinary pumps and same ordinary sky stretching over a place that would never feel ordinary to her again. Michael squeezed her hand. Richards gave a single, satisfied nod. and Samantha Ashton, standing exactly where her fight had begun, finally allowed herself to breathe. If you enjoyed the story, leave a like to support my channel and subscribe so that you do not miss out on the next one. On the screen, I have picked 2 special stories just for you. Have a wonderful day.